I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 215, and today in the show, I'm joined by Rinella and Janis Putelis of MeatEater to discuss all sorts of things related to their history and experiences hunting whitetail deer. And I'm sharing some very big news. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. And today, like I just said, I've convinced my friends over at MeatEater, Rinella and Janis Putelis, to come over to the dark side with us and talk about whitetails for a bit. And man, it's going to be a good time. You likely know Steve and Janis from the MeatEater TV show or podcast, or maybe from Steve's books like American Buffalo or Scavenger's Guide to Hot Cuisine, or just from all of their other adventures across the world chasing big game and fish. But both of these guys began their hunting careers, just like me and some of you, hunting whitetails in western Michigan. So today I want to get these two back to their roots and back to talking about deer. So that's what we did. We had a great time with it, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. But before we get to all that, I want to share some big news with you about the future of Wired to Hunt and actually my own career. If you've been listening for a while now, you've likely heard me allude to some new projects over the past few months. And I'm excited that today I can finally share with you what's going on. Some very big, very exciting stuff. But in order to do a good job of explaining this new chapter, I feel like I need to go back, because I think to understand where things are headed, we need to understand where things started, how I got to this point. So if you've heard this story before, I apologize. Bear with me for a minute, but I have to quickly regale you with this story of Wired to Hunt. This began way back in the summer of 2008. I was 20 years old, still in college. I was working this summer internship in New York City with a digital marketing agency. Basically, my job there was to work with bloggers to help promote their clients' products. So I'd send free gear to a shoe blog, and they talk about the new Reeboks or something. So I'm there, I'm in New York, and I'm just going nuts because I can't be out in the woods scouting. I can't be prepping for hunting season. I had nowhere to go hike or fish, just surrounded by concrete and loud noises and people everywhere, and it was killing me. So I got this idea, why couldn't I start a blog of my own about deer hunting? I was working with all these other people with cool websites, and they were doing this awesome stuff. Why couldn't I do that myself and maybe scratch that deer hunting itch too? So with no real prior experience, I started a website. I called it Wired to Hunt, and for a few months, I dabbled on there writing stories and articles about my past hunts and products and stuff like that, and it was fun. But when school picked back up that fall, it kind of fell off the wagon, got caught up in everything else, until fast forward another year, till the next fall. Now it's the fall of 2009, and I'm working my first full-time job after college. I was out in Silicon Valley in California, working for this major tech company. And again, I couldn't get out in the woods and I was missing hunting season and just going nuts. So I turned back to wired hunting again to scratch that itch. But this time things got cranked up to a new level, because while I was out there, I was at Barnes & Noble looking around, and I picked up this book called Crush It. And it was all about turning your passion into a career. And I read that book and was just unbelievably inspired. It gave me this new confidence that maybe I could do something like that too. So after just a few weeks in that day job, I decided, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. I had to be working on something that I really believed in, something that really inspired me, something that energized me, something that I loved. So I decided that fall that someday, no matter how much work it was going to take, I was going to find some way to work in the outdoors and turn wired hunt into a business, making a living, doing something I was passionate about. So I started getting after it. I woke up at 4:30 every morning, started working on the website, then I'd go to the day job, then I'd come home, I'd eat dinner, and I'd start working on it again, and I'd keep going till 1 or 2 in the morning. I did this for months and months and months. Eventually I moved back to Michigan, and my girlfriend at the time, this was much to her chagrin, but I was obsessed. I read every book I could about blogging and social media and marketing, and I dove even further, headfirst into all things whitetails, learning everything I possibly could, taking my knowledge and experience way up to another level, and then sharing everything I learned along the way through Wired to Hunt. And I did this for years and years, just grinding away, working on Wired to Hunt every day, every night, just making slow but steady progress. And after a couple of years, I actually began to make a little bit of money. And then a few more years later, I was making substantial enough money that I started to think that actually maybe I could do this as a job, especially if I had more time. So I started working on this plan to actually take that leap. My wife and I had lots and lots of kitchen table chats about what this would mean for our family, how I could actually pull something like this off. I started working on like a savings plan. I started lining up more little side jobs so that if I could quit my job, I'd have additional streams of income to help ends meet. And finally, in the fall of 2013, I walked out of my day job at Google and leapt off the cliff into the world of entrepreneurship and running Wired to Hunt full time. It was one of the absolute scariest but most exciting days of my life. I remember on that final drive home from the office that day, I was on the highway in my car, and I remember just thinking about all this and just breaking down crying. I mean, full bore bawling with joy, with just this insane rush of emotions. I mean, so much work had led up to this point, and now it was actually happening. It was crazy. It was thrilling. It was terrifying, and it was real now. I had achieved this massive, seemingly impossible goal. So now here I was doing it. I was running the website. I was making videos, writing articles for magazines. That next spring, I started the podcast, and all those things kept growing and growing. I just kept working at it, building new relationships, trying new things, learning more and more year after year, and things kept growing. And it was a dream come true that I could do this kind of stuff, writing and talking about hunting and my outdoor lifestyle, and somehow making a living from that. I was so blessed. But in recent years, as much as that was incredible and fulfilling, in recent years my goals and aspirations have begun to evolve. In those early years when I first started Wired to Hunt, it was just to scratch that itch. And then as it grew, it began to get to the point where maybe I could make a little bit of money from it. And then I wanted to see if I could build something that could reach a lot of people, and then I did that. And then I wanted to see if I could actually make enough from the business to do it full time, and I did that. And then I wanted to see could I build things up enough where I can make a good living and not be worried about making the mortgage payment every month. And I was eventually able to do that. But more recently, a new set of goals. Over the past few years, a new set of goals have grown larger and larger in my mind. I think it was 2 years ago that I was encouraged to start thinking about and writing out 5 and 10-year goals for myself and my business. And when I started to do that, when I started to really think about all of this, the main goals that stood out to me were related to my desire to make an impact, a significant, long-lasting impact. In 5 or 10 years, the most important things to me were that I would hopefully be making a positive impact on the hunting community, and the future of our hunting lifestyle and our wildlife and our wild places. I wanted to look back on my career and be able to say that I was a leader in this space and that I was someone who elevated the conversation in the hunting world, that I was someone who led by example and represented the hunting community positively, and someone who worked to improve how we communicate about hunting and the hows and the whys and the whats of it all, both within and outside the hunting world. And I wanted to be someone who left a meaningful mark on the conservation of our wildlife populations and the lands and waters and the environment that supports them and all of us. And when these things started rising to the top of my list, I realized that my actions would have to evolve too. So that's where things stood last year. And I started addressing those goals by embarking on this major new writing project that I've alluded to for a while now. And that's still very much in the works. I'll be announcing that soon too. But another opportunity that fit just right in line with these future goals dropped into my lap last summer when I got a call from Steven Rinella. And he asked me what I was doing the first week in September. And I told him, well, I've got this Montana whitetail hunt planned. But, if the next few sentences are very compelling, I could probably be flexible with that. And as you know, that ended up leading to an invitation to go on this Alaskan caribou hunt that I did go on. It was an amazing trip. But a few days after that initial invitation, I got another call from Steve. I remember that moment well. I was actually standing in the middle of the Teton River in eastern Idaho fly fishing. And I see Steve pop up on the caller ID. And I figured, well, I ought to take this. So I waded over to a little island and I sat down, picked up the phone. And after very little introduction, Steve just jumps right into it. And he says to me something along the lines of, "Hey, Mark, I want you to help me revolutionize outdoor media." It was pretty big. He told me he was starting a new company and that he wanted me to help him build it. And he wanted me to be one of the leading voices of this new endeavor. He told me about all the exciting new things we could do together and the impact we could have as a team with bigger ideas and more resources. And while he didn't give me a ton of details about the new project that night, he did promise to tell me more in Alaska. And I remember just sitting there on the island afterwards, watching the sunset over the Teton Mountains to my east, and just kind of being blown away by how much things had changed since those early years in that little cinder block New York City one-room apartment of misery. I just remember my mind being abuzz with questions. What could this lead to? Was this something I should do? What would this look like? How in the world did I get to this point? I never in the past ever considered for a second changing in any substantial way what I was doing with Wired to Hunt, or the idea of going into business with anyone else. But here was this opportunity with Steve that I had to look really hard at. And I don't think there's anyone else in the world who could have come to me with an idea like this and actually gotten me to buy into it. But Steve was unique in that I've looked up to him for a very long time as a role model of sorts, and as the absolute finest example, I believe, of what a leader in the hunting and fishing space should be doing. I've looked at Steve over the years as the best spokesman and representative of our community. And for a long time now, I've been working with long-term aspirations of someday hopefully doing enough good to be in that conversation too. And now here that guy was asking me to step up alongside of him and to work together. So now fast forward more than 6 months and many, many conversations later and many long sleepless nights of debating what to do, and here we are. And I'm very excited to announce now that Steve and myself and a handful of other like-minded people are building a new company, combining what he's done with MeatEater and what I've done with Wired to Hunt, with the goal of really revolutionizing the hunting and fishing media landscape, and to take things in a new and more positive direction, and to leave a very real, long-lasting legacy. Now, how exactly all that's going to look, and how it's all going to happen, that's still very much up in the air. We are very early in the development of the company still. There are lots of unknowns. We will be sharing lots more in the weeks and months to come, but I can promise there are some very cool things in the works. So in the short term, though, here's what's happening. Wired to Hunt is still going to be continuing on as is. The Wired to Hunt podcast will be living on into infinity. I'll be continuing doing my wired hunt videos, but I'm just going to be able to do all these things now with much more support and resources. I'm actually going to have other people, a team, to help me do this kind of stuff rather than just little old me trying to do everything. So this just means that everything's going to be higher quality, produced at a greater scale, and with new opportunities that I just never could have had as a solo operation. And you're also going to see, me getting more involved with different MeatEater projects too, and some brand new projects from me and Steve and others as well. So lots of exciting things in the future. One other thing I did want to briefly mention is that along with all these exciting developments, there are also going to be some changes you'll probably notice with some of the partners we've worked with. Inevitably, when combining brands like Steve and I are doing, there are going to be some adjustments and changes necessary to get everyone moving in the same direction. Some of that we're still in the process of figuring out right now, but one change you'll likely notice, and that I thought was at least mentioning here, was our change from working with Sitka Gear to now inheriting Steve and MeatEater's long and positive relationship with First Light. And I just want to call this out because Sitka has been such a great partner to Wired to Hunt and myself personally over the years. They have been one of our absolute greatest supporters from the very beginning. And I've been a huge believer in their team and their product and their mission. And I can't tell you how much I've appreciated that relationship. So, while Sitka will not be our title sponsor of the podcast anymore, I will always be a friend of the company and the people there. And I have nothing but very good things to say about what they've got going on. That said, I am very excited too to get to know the First Light gear firsthand this year, and given my experiences with folks from their team like Ryan Callahan, I know it's going to be a great group to work with as well. And given their strong focus on conservation and public land advocacy, I'm also excited to see what we can do on that front. So I've also heard that myself and Steve and the MeatEater team are going to have a unique ability to influence new product design moving forward as well. So that's something to look forward to also. So there it is, folks. The biggest news I've had to share in at least 5 years or so. It's a big new direction in my career and life and with Wired to Hunt, and I'm stoked about it. Just very, very excited and very, very thankful. But what I really need to tell you is that none of this would be possible without all of you, the Wired to Hunt community. I mean, I've gotten so many notes and emails and messages of support and feedback over the years, and some of you have been following me from the very beginning, way back in 2008, and have supported me all along the way, and I just can't thank you enough. I mean, words just don't do it justice. But serving a community like this one, people like you, it has made this the most fulfilling work I could ever ask for. And I'm so excited to continue doing that moving forward, just hopefully in an even more impactful way. So thank you for that opportunity. And, as we say every week, thanks for staying Wired to Hunt. Now, enough of all that. I know what you really want to hear about is deer, and you want to hear from Steve and Yanni. So let's take a very quick break to thank our partners at Whitetail Properties, and then let's get right into it.
This week with Whitetail Properties, we are joined by Billy O'Connor, a land specialist out of Kansas. And Billy is going to be telling us about what to consider when buying a property with a friend.
Buying a property with a friend is a great idea. It helps you get more land for less. And it also helps with the cost and investment of time that you kind of need for improvements. Plus, it's just fun to kind of share in the experience of owning land with someone who is passionate about the outdoors as you are. But you do need to think through kind of the process a little bit to make sure that you kind of cover all scenarios kind of going down the road. When buying with a friend, you first want to talk through ideally what each partner wants out of the experience. Is this for an investment? Is it to raise mature whitetail by letting them get to a certain age class? Is it a place you want to bring friends and family to hunt as well? Assuming you both want to manage for deer, usually friends have the same goal and approach to management, but often one person will want to hunt other things such as quail and small game, and the other partner may not necessarily want to do that. So you kind of want to talk all that through. If you are an out-of-state buyer, you do need to keep in mind that the state of Kansas, you're allowed one landowner tag per 80 acres. So if you both want landowner tags, you need to make sure the property is 160 acres or more. I'd suggest you buy the property under an LLC. That way, everything can kind of be explained in the bylaws in the event that something does come up down the road where you guys do need to split it or sell it, things such as a divorce or someone has more kids than they anticipated and or a death in the family and someone needs to sell. those type of things. You can kind of go over and get that out of the way from the get-go.
If you'd like to learn more and to see the properties that Billy currently has listed for sale, visit whitetailproperties.com/O'Connor. That's OCONNOR.
I like that we can hear the.
Yeah, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. That's good. Smart to keep the door open.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're here with Janis Putelis and Steve Rinella.
And a lot of frogs.
And a lot of frogs. You know, we're sitting in a log cabin kind of deal. And I wanna pull you guys into my world because so often you guys are off running around Alaska or somewhere exciting. And I'm chasing whitetails all the time. So when I come on the MeatEater podcast, I feel like a little bit like the redheaded stepchild. But
You don't actually feel like you're stuck, though.
No. But
And dude, it's not. But here's the thing: what you're saying isn't true.
yeah, well, what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to say.
But I mean, I get what you're saying, but I'm like I do a lot of stuff that would be way beneath most outdoorsmen.
Such as?
I fish channel cats in the middle of the winter. I don't know.
That's true.
Hunt small game, fish rough fish.
Well, this is the point I'm trying to get to, though, is that while you guys are often on these very glamorous super hunts that people look at and maybe dream about.
Yeah.
Like gray squirrels in Kentucky behind dogs.
Exactly. You both began
Or poke poling and limb lining and jug fishing for cats in the Ohio River.
this too. What I'm trying to say, Steve, is that you guys did begin right here in Michigan chasing whiteys.
Actually, not that far from here.
No.
Oh, mega nostalgia on the way in today, for sure.
Because we're in southwestern Michigan. Both of you guys come from my home state. Janis, you're really close to home, right?
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably within 30 miles.
Yeah. And a couple hours for you, Steve? Mm-hmm. So we are in the heart of our history.
Yeah.
All three of us right here. Michigan, deer country. So I want to try to convince you guys to talk whitetails with me for an evening.
Would love to. Do you? But just before we get started, do you mean like whitetails in the way that I understood them when I was growing up as a Michigan whitetail hunter, or different than that?
No, that. Okay. I want us to talk about your history, where it started for you guys with whitetails.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of go from there. But before we get to your own personal histories with whitetails, Steve, you always do a really nice job talking about the natural history of different critters when you're going on a hunt or talking about them. Do you have any interesting whitetail natural history
Yep.
that you could spring on us?
Yeah.
Can we hear?
Can I lay it on you?
Yeah, please.
Is it okay if it involves black-tailed deer and mule deer?
Well, of course it would.
Okay, so there's an idea, and I don't know that this idea is true, but there's an idea of how this demonstrates how successful the white-tailed deer is as a species. Now, there's going to be people who hear this and they might fact check and dispute elements of it, but there's a narrative that goes that whitetails have been around and kind of in their sort of same recognizable state for vastly longer than our other deer species, and that they have been, almost in perpetuity, that they have had sort of their central zone being down in the south, what's now the southeastern United States. And there was a time historically during a very wet period when whitetails moved their way across and basically colonized the whole country from coast to coast. And then a dry period came, and whitetails shrunk back to the southeast U.S. and left a remnant population of deer along the Pacific coast and the wetter areas of the Pacific coast. Over time, over the hundreds of thousands of years, those became blacktails. Later, during another long wet period, those blacktails expanded their range eastward, and whitetails once again expanded their range westward. There was a hybridization event that happened, and that is where we got the mule deer from. And the mule deer is a very new species, and the mule deer is very finicky.
The most fragile of those species, right?
Finicky, ultimately ephemeral species. But you have this whitetail that can just do, that's always been and seemingly always will be on the landscape.
So the theory being that whitetails are the original.
Yeah. This is, I think, this is an idea put forth by Valerius Geist.
He seems to be authority on many ungulates.
Yeah. And some people would say he's an authority on many things he's not actually an authority on. But in the ungulate world, but Valerius Geist has a lot of interesting ideas. I was reading a piece of this not long ago where he's postulating that the reason Clovis and Folsom points are fluted is that they were packing that projectile points. Is that they were packing that fluted piece with some sort of poison, right? Which is an idea you will not find in mainstream anthropological corners, but it's an idea that he just kind of puts out. Like he now and then will just like sort of introduce these big ideas, and then, as you know, a friend of mine put it, like he'll introduce a big idea and then kind of leave the room as everything catches on fire. You know,
kind of like a drop the mic moment. Yeah. He just steps out.
It's like try and argue about that for a while.
Wow. He seems
so how's that for a whitetail tidbit?
It was good.
Yeah, I'm not standing behind any of it. I'm just telling you that's a thing that that's a thing I read from a single source and didn't take the time.
Yeah,
didn't take the time to go and see if there's the sort of academic consensus around that idea or not.
It is interesting, and it kind of makes sense in a little bit when you look at the fidelity of the species of the whitetail. Of all the species, it makes sense they've been around the longest here, because they are the most adapted to the widespread environments across the country. They can make anything work.
They can do anything.
Yeah.
They can do anything. And they look how readily they adapted to human presence.
Yeah. Well, I just did a podcast on my own about coyotes recently, and how kind of like there's a few species here that have done amazingly well living with humans. Whitetails, coyotes, rats, some basic vermin like that.
Canada geese.
Yeah.
The crow.
They've found a way to make it work, and that's kind of admirable, I think, to a degree. It's interesting to me.
When you're in a grocery store parking lot and there's a bird hopping around under your car, it's probably an English sparrow. That bird's not, that bird's a Eurasian bird. It's not from here. It's the most populous bird on the planet and has the largest home range of any bird on the planet. It's just one of those winners, man. Yep. They just win.
Yep.
And whitetails just win and win.
But it's funny how we, what's the word I always forget when you put like human traits to animals?
Anthropomorphize.
Yeah. Anthropomorphize these animals, and how you look at that trait as admirable, where really it's just been natural selection that has made those animals succeed, right? And we look at it as sort of this admirable trait, but it's just like, it's kind of how the shit's rolled. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I don't know that I look at it as admirable, because I tend to like those, here's what I'm trying to say. There's two kinds of people in this world, right? There's kind of people that you lump everyone into two groups. So there's two kinds of people in this world. I think there's the ones that look and they love those winners, right? So you're the guy that loves you love carp. Like, there's a successful species, carp. Crows, successful species. Canada geese, successful species. White-tailed deer, successful species. The Norway rat, successful species. And people look at that and are like, that's what I like. I tend to have more of an emotional attachment to those finicky, more delicate species that don't cope well with people, that don't coexist well with people. I kind of like see more like a sort of more beauty in their story.
That just means that 50 years ago, you would have been buddies with the Canada goose.
Yep.
Now you're not.
Yeah, 50 years ago, sure. Yeah.
Well,
I would have been like, I used to like Canada geese when it seemed like they were going to vanish from the face of the earth.
Yeah,
but now
I feel like you're that guy who says, "Well, I liked that band before they were cool." That's kind of what this is.
Yeah, it's like a you know what it is because I think that I really appreciate wilderness, and so I think that there's some of these things that the animals that don't do well with people, that don't do well with civilization, we tend to associate with wilderness, and I like wilderness, however you define it. I have my own personal way that I would sort of go about defining it. And there's animals I associate with it, right? Yeah. So like grizzly bears, right? It's not that grizzly bears don't cope well with people. People don't cope well with grizzly bears. I think if when they come up, when they start to like interface with populated areas, they die. They tend to get killed because they get themselves in trouble.
Yep.
I think that if we had just utmost tolerance for the bears and were deferential to the bears, they would probably be doing great. But when they butt up against people, they suffer, right? They can't coexist. And there's a handful of other things. But you're right about the point you make about Canada geese is a valuable point, because I think that the same way you could have gone back to 1930 and you would have listed the wild turkey in with grizzly bears and mule deer
and even whitetails.
Yeah.
So
you'd have said like, there's an animal that can't hack it.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact it just needed the slightest bit of help with a little bit of regulation.
So, you could say that it's important that people do care about these underdog species at times, because they won't have the chance to get to that higher end of the cycle if no one did. Thank goodness people cared about turkeys and deer and said that that's an underdog species right now. I like that, because now they're top of the chain again.
Yeah,
but you did exactly what I said we weren't going to do. You've got us talking about grizzly bears now.
No, you did. You did. I think you invited it.
Whitetails. Guys, whitetails. I want to talk about your first deer, your first whitetail deer. Janis, do you remember that experience?
First one I ever killed?
Yeah.
I do.
How'd that go?
We were outside.
Is this the one you killed and then it got away?
No. My first bull out kind of got away.
No, I thought you got one. Isn't there a story where you got one and even was like sort of confirmed that you had gotten it, and then you came back and it wasn't there anymore?
Oh yeah, but that's much later. I was an adult. No. We don't have to rehash that story. I think we've already told it twice on the MeatEater podcast. But we were outside of Three Rivers, Michigan, near the Latvian camp.
Is that Three Rivers Archery, or is that a different Three Rivers? A different Three Rivers.
I think a different Three Rivers. And we were, it was probably, we only stand hunted until 9 or 10, usually opening day. And then it was drives from there on out, the rest of Saturday and all of Sunday. And I say all of Sunday, it was probably half of Sunday. And we just that was kind of like the whole hunt, right? It lasted about a day and a half.
How old were you at this point?
Whatever the minimum age was.
14
right?
14 for firearm.
So I think I had been hunting in Wisconsin already for a couple of years, but hadn't killed one yet. And we were doing a drive, and I was a shooter. And I think a couple, can't quite remember, three came running by, and I emptied however many slugs I had in my gun. I emptied them at a running deer. If I had to guess the range, 20 to 40 yards, pretty close.
Shooting from the hip.
No. No, but definitely kind of leading the animal. And I believe it was the last shot, and it just cartwheeled, rolled over.
Was that you expected that to happen, or was that surprising? Like, oh, shit, I actually hit it.
Oh, man. Probably a little bit of both. I mean, you're you're shooting and you're expecting it to happen, but then when it does, you're like, whoa, And it was emotional. I think the emotions came later because I was sort of just in awe at first.
Yeah.
Walked over there to it, and you know how it is on a drive. The deer get pushed through. There's a bunch of shooting, and then you sort of figure out slowly who actually hit some stuff, and you kind of help people retrieve deer, and you go over and do some gutting and, help and whatnot drag out. So I had a few minutes alone with the deer before someone else got there. And I remember walking up to it and not seeing a hole in it. And just kind of scratching my head like, maybe it's not dead. And its head was just kind of tilted over just a little bit. And I grabbed its ear. And when I pulled its ear, it was almost like just half of its head came towards me. And I had somehow, like, I don't know exactly where it hit, but basically it was like a perfect melon. The skull had just cracked open like a perfect melon.
Wow.
And the brain was just sitting there. It was wild. Not like way open. That part is an exaggeration, but I remember looking in there and seeing the brain. But it wasn't like it was all mushy and there wasn't eyeballs popping out everywhere. It was just a glancing hit. Who knows?
A very quick death.
Probably. Yeah. When it hit the ground, it didn't flop.
But that's not where you were aiming. You don't know where you were aiming.
No, just leading a deer running through the woods, So it was, I think as the people came there and you start to get congratulations and you get the blood smeared on your face.
You guys do that?
Yeah, I don't think my dad ever really did that, but someone in the group did.
Lavians?
Yeah.
Did you feel it was a Lavian thing?
No. No. I don't.
They picked it up from Red Dawn?
Maybe. But yeah, there was congratulations, and I was excited, and there was, But I definitely remember like some severe remorse, definitely some tears, trying to process it all. I remember it being heavy duty.
So it was like after all like the cheers and the handshakes and everything, when you were thinking about it later, that you started feeling
No,
stuff?
it was right then and there. I think I was probably over it. By the time we were dragging the deer out of the woods, I was thinking about when I was going to shoot the next deer.
Yeah. For me, it was when I saw it. We were tracking. When you walked up on it and when you first spotted it, and I had this just like, I don't know, this like dropping of my stomach or something feeling.
Right.
Like, wow, it's dead.
Yeah.
This happened.
It's real.
A lot of people talk about, and I experienced this too, that first shot at a deer, that first deer you killed. Maybe those two things didn't happen in the same instance, but you almost black out. Some people talk about like it happened, and then you're like, whoa, like I don't remember drawing my bow or aiming the gun or doing anything. It just like, I went into autopilot and just happened. Did you have anything like that, or were you mentally in it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember like a blackout sort of a situation. The next year, I was bow hunting, but the day before the opening shotgunner, and I had a doe come up within a few yards. And I was shaking so bad that the arrow just fell right out of my bow and hit the ground. I somehow got it back in there, and she just had circled around me, and she's on the other side of a snag. And I just that was more like blackout because, she was feet away, and I was shaking and just like, must shoot arrow at animal, and I fired one loose. It went right over her back, and, she ran off. And I feel like I had no control. Like, I was not in control of what I was doing. Yeah. You're just trying to just make it through so that you get that experience. So hopefully next time, you can have some composure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to so many different people, and kind of this topic comes up a lot often. You hear some people that never, ever had that experience. They're always 100% in control in the moment. Mm-hmm. And you talk to some people that they're still experiencing that now, even though they've been hunting for 10 or 15 years. And then there's some people that it's like an evolution. Like some people kind of build that control over time. I don't know if it's a personality trait or if it's just your emotion level or what it is. I don't know. Steve, do you have anything like that? Did you?
I think for most people, exposure diminishes it because there's less adrenaline,
Right.
my older brother talks about a thing where he what he doesn't like when he gets rattled, bow hunting for elk, right? He gets rattled and like blows a shot. What he doesn't like is he feels that what he doesn't like about himself in those situations that he feels is that he's so lusty. He's so lusty for that elk, right? He wants it so bad that it rattles him. Like his desire becomes so like overwhelming that he can't function properly.
Interesting.
And later he looks at it that almost like to flub a shot, he looks at it almost like a sin of the flesh. Like the way someone might be like, oh, I wish I didn't cheat on my wife, but I'm so overcome by passion and now I hate myself. Like he'll feel that way about flubbing a shot. He's like, why do I have to want that so bad?
Yeah.
That I can't do it in the way that I do the normal things that I do in my life. Like I don't get all panicky when I'm doing normal things in my life. Why do I get panicky then?
Yeah, whenever I'm having a hunting season where I haven't had much success yet, that my wife is always saying, you want it too bad. You want it too bad. As soon as you stop caring, you'll get that deer. So something to it. Do you remember your first deer story?
Oh, yeah, man. Vividly. So, so for whatever reason in my family, we would kind of jump the gun on the legal hunting ages. Like my dad, my dad would look at sort of the big major points of the law and abide by those, but some details were kind of lost on him. And I think that he wasn't, he wasn't really brought up in a way to, he wasn't brought up in a way that people like paid a lot of attention to that stuff. I think just who he was surrounded by in his formative years. So yeah, I remember being up in my own tree stand when I was 11 with a bow. So young that like my old man would march me down or send me down whatever and do a river bottom to be up in a tree, and it would get dark and just be petrified, deathly afraid of getting out of that tree, and would just wait. One of my brothers or whatever would come down, or my dad would come and shine a light from up on the top of the ridge or something, and I'd have to get down and just being so scared, man, like that young, And I remember the first deer I missed. I remember my first encounter with a buck was early in the season when I was 11, and all of a sudden I hear brat, brat, brat coming through the woods. I have no idea what the hell that would be, and it turns out like a buck kind of walked by me, and probably in range, but I was so just like wow, Then later that year we went up to Baldwin. We used to hunt some public land up in Baldwin at a place called Teapot Trail because someone had hung a teapot in a tree, and of course people then had to like shoot it full of holes with 22s and whatnot because there's something hanging in a tree you got to shoot at it, right? So there's this shot up teapot hanging at the entrance of this trail on public land up Manistee National Forest, and we would hunt it by just walking the logging roads till you found where 2 or 3 deer had recently crossed the road. Then you'd go in 75 yards off the side of the road and hang up a stand and just sit the trail. All the better if that trail intersected another trail that had 2 or 3 deer tracks on it. Then you were like in the money. So I remember we cut a track crossing the road. We cut like where it looked like a deer yesterday had crossed Teapot Trail, and it looked like a deer today had crossed Teapot Trail. Went and hung up a tree stand. I mean, I was sitting there an hour, man. Alone at 11, sitting there an hour, and here comes this forky. And this thing, I mean, you could have reached out and grabbed it. He's 10 yards off the base of the tree, and I remember shooting right underneath him and just feeling sick. Just feeling sick about it. Then...
Why did you feel sick? Was it because you'd failed yourself? Were you afraid of
just
what other people
missed?
Think?
Just missed. Yeah, whatever. I don't know if it was because... I can't remember like what it was, but just like, you grew up around deer hunters. It's like you want to be a deer hunter. You want to get a deer. Yeah. And just being so bummed. Now that I think about it, I maybe was 12 when I missed that one. But that, I was. Because I had my first thing. Yeah. It wasn't that. It was. So I was 12. I was 11 when I had the first time I ever had a buck come grunting through the woods and pass by me, and I couldn't even pull it together to pick up my bow. He wasn't like really close, but it was just, I remember like a real moment. And you know where that was? There used to be a place, like I grew up in an area in Michigan where there's a lot of camps. So we had a Owassipee Scout Camp was near us. When I was 13, I got a job washing dishes at Camp Pendaluan. I'd be washing dishes, and the campers were older than I was. Yeah, the band camp kids were like 2 years older than me, and me and my brother back there washing their damn dishes, mixing Kool-Aid in a garbage can with a canoe paddle at Camp Pendaluan. So all these camps, like all the kids would come camp, but in the fall it'd just be empty land. And you could buy Owassipee, you could buy a permit. You could go buy like a trespass permit for $10. I mean, it was that cheap. I remember you could buy an ice fishing permit for $3 or something. So that buck was on a Owassipee Scout land, Owassipee Boy Scout camp, which I think now is not a Owassipee camp anymore. And then I turned 13. And you're not supposed to hunt with a rifle till you're 14, but I was doing it during this 1 year grace period that we were allowed in my family for whatever reason. I was 13, and just like Yanni, we were doing a deer drive. So we sat in the morning in our ground blinds, because this is before you could hunt from an elevated platform. We sat in the morning in our ground blinds, and we knew this area along this creek, Mosquito Creek. We knew this area where there was a big bend and a big bottom area that was full of like multiflora rows and a lot of tall grass down there. It's like a lot of sunlight would come through down in this area. And we knew that deer would bed up down there, and we knew when you bumped them out of there. This is on a farm owned by a family called the Zerlot family. They ran a dairy operation, and they grew a lot of alfalfa and corn to feed their own dairy. And they had an orchard. They did some apple stuff and did some timber. And my dad was friends with them through church, so we would hunt their place. And we had done it enough. It's just the family had been hunting there so long. You knew that there was a deer there. You knew what ridge they went up. So my brother-in-law and my brother went down, and I went on the ravine, the ridge they used to climb out of the ravine, and I just sat there and heard deer coming, and this deer pulled up less than 10 yards away. But all I could see was its face and neck. I could see the white patch on its throat. And I was shooting a Marlin. It was a Winchester Model 94, but a 32 Special, which I'd gotten from a man named Eugene Groders. And this guy, Eugene Groders, my dad hung out with him. He's in his 70s. He's a World War II vet like my old man. And he had a gun for every year he'd been alive. And at some point he realized he had like an extra one or two and let me pick one. And he gave me this Model 94 and a 32 Special, and it had a peep sight on it. And I remember it had like a little reducer you could screw into the peep sight. And I remember centering that peep sight on the white patch in that deer's throat. It was a spike horn buck, and hit him high.
You still have that rifle?
No, you know what? I sold it for $300.
Ooh, wow.
Because I wanted when everyone wanted a 30-06 and stuff, right? People were getting sick of 30-30s and sick of 32s and wanted like 30-06s and sold it for next to nothing to a place called 500 Guns. Hit the deer, kind of hit it bad, hit in the jaw, rolled down the hill. And instead of just working the lever action, I remember like I did a lot of fur trapping, and I like the mountain men a lot and stuff. I remember I had my knife like on the outside of my shirt, like a sheath knife, a butcher's knife, right? Skinning knife. And I remember I ran down the hill and got down on the deer, and the deer got back up again, and I jumped on the deer. It just didn't occur to me to shoot it, And I jumped on the deer and wrestled it down, tackled it to the ground, and cut its throat. Yeah.
That's
just
intense.
Like not having any, just didn't occur. Like looking back in my mind, like why you wouldn't have shot the deer again, I have no idea. But I remember that thing got up, and I was like, this thing's not getting away, and I jumped right on its back.
Was the rest of the crew impressed?
They weren't there.
When they heard the story, though?
I don't remember that.
No.
I remember I carried it. It was small enough that I carried it up out of there on my shoulders.
Wow.
I could tell you the shirt I had on. It was one of those quilted flannel shirts. It was kind of a rust color with blue and green stripes, blue and green checker pattern over it.
Wow.
And I had a pair of Army surplus wool pants on. And I had a pair of pack boots on, leather upper, rubber bottom pack boots.
What was the weather like?
Sunny, hot, unseasonably hot. Would have been probably November 17th.
Do you remember the
10 a.m.
Do you
Dude,
remember?
I remember it so clear.
Do you
man.
remember the first time you ate that deer? The first time you ate meat from the first deer you ever killed?
Yeah, we ate the heart that morning. I remember that clearly because I brought it home, and the old man, like, it was a ritual we had. If you killed a deer in the morning, in late morning, they would fry the deer in a pan with onions, and you eat it with ketchup. My old man wouldn't let us put ketchup on deer meat. Normally, he'd get really mad if you put ketchup on deer meat, but he'd let you put ketchup on the heart meat. Yeah, he'd be like insulted, or he'd act insulted if you put ketchup on deer meat.
Do you think that even at that young age, was that a different thing, eating something that you pulled the trigger on? Did you recognize that even then?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was different. But you got to realize, man, at that age and in that time, I wanted to be the mountain man, right? So anything that had anything to do with like fur trapping, eating crazy shit, living off the land, killing shit with knives, it was like anything like that. That's what I read about, thought about, did. So it would have resonated with me. But it was already like a thing we did anyway. Like my old man, this is no joke. My old man would go check other guys' gut piles to get the hearts. If he heard about a guy getting a deer and gutting a deer out in whatever field, he would go out there and check and get the heart and the liver out of it. Wow. Yeah, it was he made a big point out of it.
Yeah, and I came up in a much more casual deer hunting culture. Like we hunted probably really 2 days, maybe 3 in Wisconsin, 2, 3 in Michigan. Once I was old enough to start getting serious about bow hunting, I'd started putting in more time when I was about probably 16, because I think I was driving my own car at that point. But, yeah, the whole eating the animal, we just had in Wisconsin, the tradition was that on Saturday night, we would just have it was basically like a sauce that would be made with mushrooms, kind of like a hunter's gravy. And it'd be
Lavian?
It'd be... I mean, sure, a Latvian guy made it, but I'm sure that many cultures make this similar sauce. Definitely a little bit, probably like a sour cream kind of a base, like a whiter sauce.
Definitely Latvian.
But it would have, I think, heart and tenderloin in it. You know, we take all the tenderloins of all the deer that were shot that day and take the hearts. It all get chopped up and put into it. And I always remember being like, well, what's this piece going to be? Ah, dang it, hard again. Oh, good, tenderloin,
Chewy.
Yeah. And, yes, I didn't get real serious about all that stuff until I sort of, came of age on my own living in Colorado, and I was probably 19, 20, and it just happened to be that I had my own elk at home all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, what do I do now? I better butcher this thing.
Yeah.
And just started chopping it up, and next thing you know, I was going down that path, And
that's cool. And here you are.
Mm-hmm.
For me, now, of course, the first deer experience is always one, their first animal, whatever it might be, kind of sticks with you. But then for me also, when I look back on my childhood experiences as a hunter, there's a moment or two that kind of stands out as I don't know, that special moment or experience that I can just see, and it has that kind of magical feeling. For me, I think it was 96 or 97. You guys were probably off in college by then or something. I was 8 years old.
Dude, I was in graduate school.
So you really were.
started graduate school in 96.
So
I
was skipping my senior year of high school.
Wow. So I was 7 or 8 or something like that. And
what?
Yeah. I was born in 87.
Huh.
How can that be?
So this is in 96 or 97, somewhere around there. And the youngest guy in the camp other than me was maybe in his mid-20s or something, and I kind of idolized him growing up. He was always up at camp, and he always killed deer. He killed an 8-point buck, which is the biggest deer I'd ever seen up there. And so opening morning, he killed this 8-pointer, and we put it up on the buck pole, and there it was. That evening, my grandpa killed a great big 7-pointer, the biggest buck I'd ever seen killed. And that night, I remember I'd heard the gunshot. I was sitting with my dad. Every time you heard a gunshot, I was like, Dad, do you think that was one of the guys from our group? Do you think that was one of the guys? And he's like, oh, no, that was way too far away, Mark. You'll know it. If you almost get knocked out of the seat, you'll know it's one of our guys. And so finally, late that night, boom, I jolted awake. I was, oh my gosh, was that one of our guys? And yeah, that was one of our guys. So Grandpa ended up shooting this deer. And I remember we all came back to the cabin. We had this little 40-acre piece up in northern Michigan, this little one-room log cabin that my grandpa had bought way back in the day. And so we all are in this one cabin. No power, no water, no anything, just some kerosene lanterns and stuff. And we're in there waiting for Grandpa to get back, and everyone else had come into camp. And
it's only 40 acres. Why don't you just go over and see what he's doing?
I don't know. That's just what we did. You just hang out at camp, and then everyone arrives. So he finally arrived and waited for one more person to get in. I just remember everyone lit the lanterns. So we all had our little kerosene Coleman lanterns, and then we walked back to where GP, we call my grandpa GP.
For Grandpa?
You know, I never knew. He didn't like the idea of being called Grandpa. I think we were just talking, kind of psychoanalyzing if he didn't like the idea of like being old, what being a grandpa signified. Yeah. So it was either for Grandpa or his middle name was Paul and his first name was Gerald. So it could have been Gerald Paul GP.
Oh, that's definitely what it was.
Yeah. So
I've not been there.
I don't know. I the Grandpa though I always thought could be possible. But either way, GP finally got back and we were all there and we got our Coleman lanterns and we walked across and it was one of those days where the snow had started falling right during that evening hunt. And so by the time we started walking out, everything was coated in snow. So it was like a white landscape, just the yellow glow then of the lanterns. And we all walked out, and there's this one creek that runs to the property. And we come to the edge of the creek, and I just remember GP lifting the lantern. And he goes, there he is. And then you could just see the light. And then
this sounds like one of those Christmas cards you can buy at Cabela's or Bass Pro.
And there's a picture that documents this moment now where you can just see the most beautiful deer you ever saw laying in this fresh blanket of snow, you know, laying outside, half the rack up, and I'm this 7 or 8 year old boy surrounded by these men, the guys I've idolized my whole life, and if I remember, this is definitely the first like track job I've been on, like this track, quote unquote track job. And here I am with the guys, and there's this big buck that my grandpa got, and says, there he is. And I just remember seeing him, and it just, I will never forget that moment, seeing this deer and this whole, I can see the whole thing, I can feel it now. And then that whole night and the next 2.5 days of camp, whenever we weren't actually hunting, the guys would be inside eating dinner, or eating lunch, or taking naps. I would just go stand at the buck pole and look at these 2 deer hanging there, and I just walk circles around them and touch them and look at them and think about them. And so that whole moment just sticks with me forever.
You were wired to hunt, man.
I was wired to hunt, yeah. Do you have any moment like that, Janis? Anything that stands out?
There's probably a few, but yeah, I think that there was sort of like a changeover when I probably just decided that I was going to be more serious about hunting maybe than he. And my dad was a pretty serious bow hunter when I was getting into high school years, and he got me into it. But when I just made the decision myself that I was going to also be a bow hunter, so like I said, I think I had a driver's license, so I was driving, and I remember being at the Latvian camp, hiking in. I think I actually packed in a decoy on this hunt, and I had chosen my own stand site for the first time that fall, and it was a bitchin' spot, like a old road bed between 2 swamps, and there was kind of 2 hills, opposite corners of the 2 swamps. It ended up not being a good spot. Later I learned because of the way the thermals would roll off the hills and just always be crisscrossing and whatever.
So
and I think my spread, my scent was going every direction. But I can't remember if maybe I didn't have the decoy at that time. But anyways, the first time that like my own stand, I picked it, like I knew there was deer trails, and all of a sudden there's a buck underneath my stand. And that stands out as just sort of like a moment where like, all right, like I did it.
Yeah.
Like, here I am. Like, I picked my own spot, and there's a buck standing underneath me.
Did you shoot him?
No. He got, like,
really?
I don't even know if I came to full draw.
Oh, yeah, bow hunting.
But he sensed something and basically just backed out, Didn't spook, but didn't continue down its path. But it was, like, the first time where just, like, it seemed like it had clicked. Even though it didn't kill him, it's just like, okay, like I did everything right to get to that point.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll see this again.
I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I think, that stands out. I'm sure I'll think of others, but.
Steve?
Yeah, man. Being here, being in Michigan, I definitely think of some like I remember like just like these sort of like moments where things have like this kind of like crystalline clarity, you know. I remember later in life, probably around time, like I got out of high school and went into community college for a couple of years, and took all night classes, you know, so I could trap during the day. I was trying to be a professional trapper, and like around that time, so it's been around 93, 94, being up in the UP and staying on some bank above a river. I remember watching these river otters down in the river, diving down and coming up with yellow perch. And despite the kind of, I remember surprised me there was yellow perch down there, but coming up with these yellow perch and just crunching them so loud. We were like quite a ways away that you could just hear them crunching up those perch. And I remember like something about it like spoke to me in some way, man. Like I always remember that moment. There's something about, they just seemed like otters. I'd always had like a real affinity for otters, and yeah, like that moment in some sort of way that meant something about being outside, right? The things you'd see outside that were like these kind of like special seeing things outside moments. And another thing that sticks in my head from that same period is we used to go down to the mouth of the Pendles River. It flows out in the Lake Superior. We go out to the mouth of the Pendles and surf cast for steelhead. We'd get them in the fall, small ones. Yeah, and it was funny. I just remember one time sitting there with my brothers and something. My friend Eric Kern, who died later, and my buddy Matt Drost, who we grew up around hunting and fishing, and my brother Matt, my brother Dan, and sitting there and we were drinking Boone's Farm in the sand there, you know, and just having this moment of like, holy shit, how much do I like my friends? And like it being that, because like these were the people I hung out with outside, like out of doors. These were like the guys I hunted and fished with when we were younger.
Yep.
You know, and just having this moment of like the level of relationship, like the sort of relationship that you can sort of build in living life this way. And I'm sure other people find it in other ways, but that's just how we found it.
Yeah.
Like that said something to me about the lifestyle of hunting and fishing.
Were you hunting without like parental guidance and like more with your peers or on your own by the time you were in your late teens? Or at what point did you sort of like break away from hunting with, you know, the family group that you grew up with?
So it would have been when I started bow hunting as a teenager, so like 13 years old or 14 years old or whatever that was. Like I grew up hunting on our northern Michigan deer camp, and that was the only place we ever hunted, was going up to we call it Kenroven, was what my grandpa called this place. So that's where I always hunted, where we learned and did all that stuff. And then my family bought a little 3.5 acre lot in southern Michigan in Grand Rapids and built a house on it. And so when we built that, then my dad and I decided to learn how to bow hunt. He had never bow hunted before, and I was, 12 or whatever it was, and we were going to learn to bow hunt together on our 3.5 acres behind the house. And so I hunted with him the first year or whatever it was until I could legally go on my own. And then I just started trying to figure it out on my own after that. Been doing it kind of on my own ever since. So that was kind of my path.
Yeah.
Didn't know what I was doing, though.
Kind of as quick as we could, we got off on our own.
Yeah. I kind of had an interesting situation because my family was kind of maybe like what you were saying, Janis. It was like very casual hunting, and that like up north it was kind of a serious thing for like opening day weekend.
Yeah, and I think when you say that, it shouldn't have like a negative connotation for anybody that's listening, because all these guys are very serious hunters. But compared to where we are now and the people that I hang out with now in the West, it's, you look back on that and you go, oh, well, we only deer hunted for 6 days out of the year.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is even though that was the case for, my grandpa or my dad or people like that, they would still self-identify as a hunter. Like, that was like one of their favorite things was hunting. Like, what do you like to do? I like to hunt and fish.
Yeah.
But they'd only actually hunt 4 days a year or something.
But how many days a year would they fish?
More than that. But still, not hundreds or anything like that.
We hunt and fish year-round, man.
Yeah. But in this case, though, it was like, it was like the culture around it. It was the experience around it. It was everything that was outside of not just pulling the trigger, but it was everything else it entailed and those, the social element of it too. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in the situation where you went and sit on a log next to a tree and just wait and see what happens, and never really learned about anything other than don't move fast, don't make loud noises. That was basically the extent of my education and how to hunt, and then from there just kind of figured it out.
It's mind-boggling how bad we were at deer hunting.
Oh yeah.
Especially compared to other things that are difficult that we like learned how to do. We just remained bad at deer hunting because we just the way the old man did it, and it just really retarded our progress. Was dumping carrots out in the woods, man.
Yeah.
Picking up dropped apples, going out to apple orchards and picking all the drops up that the farmer wasn't going to pick, and dumping those out in the damn woods. And then going to Grant, Michigan, and buying reject carrots, missized carrots. You could, no shit, when I was a little kid, $5, you could fill the back of a pickup with carrots for $5.
Wow. Did you do the sugar beets sometimes too?
Not in our area, man. It was carrots and apples. And so we just was like, my dad was like a, kind of a woodsman, you know what I mean? And like, you wanted to go out and catch a mink, man. You had to know how to read sign, right? But for deer hunting, we were just dumb. You'd go to the edge of the field, because deer seem to like being out in fields, and find a tree that looked like a good tree to hang a stand in, and dump a sack of them damn carrots out, or go in the woods and find where two trails came together and dump a sack of them damn carrots out. And so you just didn't learn about deer. You didn't learn about deer. All you learned was like, deer like carrots. That's the extent of if it would have been such a favor to me, it would have been such a favor to me and to my family as hunters. I'm not saying it's just as policy for everyone else. I'm saying a favor to me and my family as deer hunters if you wouldn't have been allowed to do that, because then you would have had to take that same level of woodsmanship, right, that it takes to catch freaking walleye in the wintertime, or it takes to get a mink to step on a 1 1/4 inch circle to catch it, to take that to deer. But we just fell into that trap that consumed a decade of my life of sitting on stupid bait piles, man. Now I kind of regret it,
Yeah. So I was on your podcast a few weeks ago, and you asked me about what I thought about the food plots versus baiting debate.
Yeah.
Are they the same thing? Are they equivalent?
Like, why is one more acceptable than the other?
One or the other. And I kind of stumbled through my answer. I wasn't happy with how I answered it in retrospect. But from a outside perspective, you guys aren't involved as much in the whitetail world now, and I don't think you have any involvement in like food plots or habitat management or anything like, other than maybe having friends that do and stuff. But from your perspective, how would you answer that question, Steve?
Who was it that I was gonna talk about that guy that said he can't define porn, but he just knows it when he sees it. I don't know. It feels like feels a little bit different to me, and I think that I've never grown a food plot in my life. I've done plenty of bait, from the time I was 11 to the time I was 19, 20. We were dumping bait out in the woods. I don't know. There's kind of I guess there's sort of like a difference in perspective and a difference in aesthetics and stuff with the guys I know that grow food plots. They seem to have sort of like kind of like a different view of a different landscape view. And so in some way, like, I weigh that into it a little bit, but yeah, I don't really know, man. I think of them differently. But when I really buckle down on it, I can't really explain why. I can't really come up with a reason why I think about them differently when I narrow down on it. Let's say you like to hunt. Let's say you like to hunt black bears, and you realize that in September, black bears will get on blueberries. Okay, or get on huckleberries, and you learn to hunt blueberry or huckleberry patches. And when you're up there eating blueberries and huckleberries, you always spit the seeds out in hopes that more blueberries and huckleberries grow up, right? Let's say that actually worked and you were like to generate some new huckleberry patch, and then later you were to kill a bear on that huckleberry patch. I would view that very differently than if I took a barrel of donuts and dumped it there.
Yeah.
But in growing up in Michigan as whitetail hunters, when my brothers drew bear tags, and you're out hunting these swamps in the UP, these vast cedar swamps in the UP where you can spend a lifetime running around out there and not run into a bear, even though there's a lot of bears around. It's like a way to get a bear in range where you can see the bear and tell if it's got a cub or not. And so when you drew a bear tag, that seemed like the way to do it. If you didn't have friends that had hounds and you wanted to get a bear during a finite period of time that was the bear season, this was the way. So we'd go out and start shooting carp with our bows and freezing them and then establish some bait stations. If I've imagined if I was in that situation right now, it would probably be the exact same way that I would go about it. So I know that I'm not coming to anything conclusive here, but just a different way. My view on baiting, I don't care if someone lives in an area where it's legal to bait and they bait, God bless them, right? But for me, I just look at that. I look at sort of the wasted chances I had to really learn about how deer use the land, to learn that rather than spending time manipulating their patterns, which is largely counterproductive anyways. Because you put it down, it changes their patterns around. They become nocturnal, right? They walk around the woods looking up into the trees. It's just like you kind of like change deer around anyways. It's kind of counterproductive. But I just look at it and I'm like, man, it would have been really interesting to the amount of time we spent bow hunting deer. It would have been really interesting to just buckle down and learn what the damn deer are doing.
Yeah.
Because now that I understand that stuff better, I review it back in my mind, the places we hunt, and it doesn't seem like it would have been that hard to unravel it. It wouldn't be hard to unravel it at all. Right. If I was to go hunt those same places now, even just reviewing it in my mind, I know how I would hunt them, and I wouldn't hunt them that way.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about what you would have, how you would be forced to better understand certain things. And as I was thinking through this question that you asked me, in retrospect later on, I was rethinking to myself, like, what are the differences in my own, more so than the things I'd mentioned. And one thing that leapt out to me as I was kind of reflecting on this more is that, when I go about working on habitat and planting food plots or doing something like that, one of the most unique and what I find compelling parts of it for me is that when I'm doing that, I'm forced to learn about and to become connected to something that's very different than what I'm hunting in other ways. And by that I mean when you have to understand habitat and when you start making changes to habitat, you need to understand things like the impact of sun and water and rain and soil and how these different forage types, benefit deer or other wildlife, and what all these different habitat pieces and parts, how that fits into this cycle, and how whatever changes we might make might influence things, and what wildlife benefit from. And you start learning about all these different things that I never would have before. I never would have started to dive into that part of this world. And to me, that's been like a really valuable thing to dive into that aspect of, very interesting, and it connects me again to the resource, to the wildlife in a different way that I've found really fulfilling and satisfying. And another piece too, and I've mentioned this.
And you wouldn't get that by dumping the pile of carrots.
You wouldn't get that by dumping the carrots, and you wouldn't get that by just hunting a junction, a funnel point either. I find a lot of value in getting to hunt all these different types of ways. I enjoy the ability to go hunt a piece of public land or somewhere where I can't change anything at all, because then you need to do nothing but understand how the deer are working the land right now and how can I use that information to be in the right place. But then there's also something really neat and fulfilling about understanding the habitat itself and how we can make that better, how we can interact with that landscape. You're not just interacting from like a surface level, but you can actually go deeper and change things, and what you need to start making those decisions in a smart way forces you to learn a lot, to engage. You engage with it in a different way that's interesting.
Yeah, you become kind of an ecologist,
Yeah.
Or you have to have an ecological understanding of things.
Yeah.
I could see it. If I owned some small chunk of land and, and there was wildlife in the area and I wasn't getting it on my property, I could tell you that I would probably become obsessed.
Yeah.
About habitat improvements, man. I know that it would happen.
And that's another thing. I feel like so often as a whitetail guy with Western hunting friends, I always find myself feeling like I'm like defending myself or something, and that I feel like there's a perception sometimes, and you guys can tell me if this is true or not, if you think from your side of this, but I feel like a lot of guys out west that hunt in the mountains and stuff look at these whitetail guys as, I don't know, lazy, doing this easy kind of hunting. It's kind of...
Dude, I don't think that at all, man. I don't...
I feel you guys think we're crazy. Like you guys are planting food plots or you're doing these things.
I come to a place like this, like where we're at right now, I come to a place like this and I'm like, my God, like the level of biodiversity.
Yeah.
One, the biodiversity is phenomenal. And then the pounds of life per unit of space is extremely high. It's just rich environment. You can be on a 600-acre farm in Michigan or 600-acre piece of property in Michigan and know that there are a lot of animals there right now. You could swoosh a pair of binoculars over 600 acres of arid grassland and within a couple of minutes say there's not a thing out there right now. It's just different. It's different.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we talked about that on the drive-in. We drove separately today, and I was with Garrett and Andy. And I was talking about being a little nostalgic about it and comparing it to out west. And, yeah, these woods are just so thick with, just like you said, just biomass. There's just so much going on here. I love that. You know, I love being in these woods for that reason.
No, it's just replete with life, man. It's amazing. I don't know why. I don't know why. I think that you grow up and people want to hunt out west, man. I think that guys in Wyoming don't grow up dreaming about hunting Michigan.
No.
Okay. Guys in Michigan, as much as you love it and do it, you kind of grow up dreaming about also being out west. And it's this sort of natural draw in this country. I mean, if you look, there's this like this Western motion that's kind of ingrained in us historically, and I think it exists. And there's kind of a romance to it, and there's a greater, I talked about there's a lot of biodiversity here, but when it comes to large mammals, there's a much like broader suite of large mammals in the West, and people are drawn to that. But I do meet a lot of guys in the Midwest who sort of have this sense of like this little bit of like an inferiority complex, or feel that they're sucking hind titty on the hunting world in some way that I don't see it. But that's coming from me too, from being like a generalist, right? Like I like to hunt whatever. So when I'm out in these woods, I'm like, man, there's tons of squirrels, tons of turkeys, tons of deer. Rivers and lakes are full of fish. You can fish the big lake. You can fish small inland lakes. You can fish streams. You can fish rivers. Year-round, sportsman's paradise, right? It just, and this is coming from a guy that left Michigan to go move to Montana. But when I'm here, I'm like, man, like if you all of a sudden put me back here, I'd be pretty excited.
But you wouldn't move back on purpose, right?
I would not. It's just it's not. Like,
I used to say that 10 years ago, but just again today on the drive-in, I was thinking like, you know what? Wouldn't be the end of the world.
Not too bad.
No.
It's not too bad.
My old man used to always tell a story talk about like an optimist, and a pessimist. Like he talked about if you had imagine this big room full of horse shit, right? And you put a kid in there and he just sits there and cries. Okay. But then you put another kid in there and he's just in there digging. He's like, with all this horse shit, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere, And so I feel like it's just like there's so much like matter of just like perception of where you are, And I go like a lot of places I go and I'm like, dude, I can just picture being here and tearing it up. And when I'm in Michigan, I think like this place we're at right now, I'm like, my God, if I lived here, I would get after it.
Yeah, and I think that's what is more important than anything is wherever you find yourself, you still got to put in the time and effort.
Oh, yeah.
To be, everybody can sit around talking about how good or bad it is here, there, or nowhere. But if you actually only hunt 6 or 8 days a year, then who gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you got to be a guy that puts in the effort.
We were talking to a guy the other day, lives in Missouri, and sports is paradise just like Michigan. Lives in Missouri, and you talk to that guy, there's no, he's doing everything. He hunts deer. He hunts turkeys. He's bank pulling flatheads. He's keeps squirrel dogs. All that guy does is hunt and fish. There's probably a lot of guys sitting around just moping around like, oh, I can't afford to do that, right? There's just people like that, and there's people that tear it up. And everywhere I go around the country, I meet guys like, we know a boatload of them now. Guys like Kevin Murphy. Kevin Murphy does not sit around lamenting the location. The guy hunts and fishes nonstop, and he's like one of the better ones out there. Every corner in the country you go, you're going to find your guys that complain about what it is, or the bucks by me aren't as big as the bucks in Iowa. Hunting here sucks. And then you're going to go down and bang on the next door, and it's going to be some guy out. He's got 4 kinds of boats parked in his driveway, and all the guy does is from his mind, he's living the American dream.
Yeah.
It's just an attitude thing.
It is. That's true. Take advantage of what you got.
And I think back to your original question, though, of Western guys thinking that, this whitetail thing is a lazy man's thing, whatever. I think we hear that, but it's just a very, very small little percentage of the overall, people. And it probably comes from the hunting media. Mm-hmm. But if you polled most Western hunters, I don't think that they feel that way about whitetail dudes,
No, I definitely don't
Now,
think
what
so.
about this? Here's another perception that the Western guys think the whitetail guys are nuts when we're sitting over here and naming the deer. What do you think about naming deer? Do you think I'm crazy when I go telling you that I'm hunting this buck named Holyfield for 4 years? Steve's, you're pondering. So
no, Janis.
Go
ahead. Janis, go ahead.
So possibly we're nuts.
No, before I think it became a thing, we had named a few. It's a natural thing to do. As soon as you've seen an animal twice, 3 times, however many times it takes to where you're like, that's the same one that has that broken third on the left side. That's the big 6 that we saw. What did we have that one time? Oh, shucks. I'm trying to remember what the name of this bull was. But it had something to do with a fence, because every time someone saw him, someone had seen him, and it was a nice 6 for us, which probably wasn't even 300 inches. But he had just stepped over a 4-strand, right? Someone had seen him step over a 4-strand and didn't jump. And so he was known as high stepper or high fence or something like that. But he got this name, and he hung out in the zone, and he was seen 3 or 4 times before someone killed him. But anyways, we were doing that before I kind of it became a thing where, the whitetail guys really popularized it, and then you started seeing it in the magazines where, the story was about how someone killed El Deuce.
El Deuce.
It's hardly an Eastern thing. If you read Hunt and Fool magazine, every article in there includes the part of the paragraph where they name it whatever the hell. Yeah. El Seis.
I had a hunter write one of those Hunt and Fool stories after we killed a bull together in Arizona, and that bull was named. He started bugling at 3 p.m. He was dead at 6, and he was named in those 3 hours. And I didn't even know it until the story came out later. But he had a very one of the weirdest bugles I've ever heard. It was kind of growly, but a digitized growl. It was like a robot bull bugling, and it sounded like he almost had issues with his larynx. It was just kind of breaking and crackling. And so in the story, he came out to be I think he was the larynx bull.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
One thing that I think one place it comes from is naming or not naming is like when you guys hunt these places out here and you study them so carefully and like are out paying attention all throughout the year and paying such detailed attention that you're watching a buck progress through the years. Like you're getting a level of familiarity with a particular animal that you're not going to achieve if you're if you're sort of a traveling like wilderness hunter. You know, like if you in a lot of locations, especially if you're always bouncing around here and there and checking out new stuff and going on like expeditions and whatnot, you're often, when you get onto an animal, it's like probably it's going to be the first time in your life you ever laid eyes on it, and probably the last. So you don't develop that level of familiarity. I think that it probably came out of, also the advent of trail cameras and other things where people are sort of like looking at it in a different way. But people you just kind of name stuff naturally anyway. Even if you're just sitting up on a glass and knob, there's like that one buck over there, or old sunshine buck, or whatever, and you might pick it up and use it for a couple minutes to describe what's around you and to develop a kind of a context of who's where. But then when you walk off there, you just forget the names. But imagine that you were going to spend 4 years on that glass and knob. The names would become very useful.
Yeah. I mean, it happened to us. We were hunting coos deer in Mexico this year.
We had a whole shitload of bucks named.
Yeah. I mean, it takes hours because it just becomes a matter of efficiency when you're like, well, let's go back to where the century buck was.
We had the century buck, normal buck, El Gigante, Dirt's buck, which didn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of names. That just sounds like normal names, right?
Yeah.
But what we didn't have is we don't have a naming process, which I think you guys go through.
You think so?
You guys kind of christen. You sort of christen a deer. Like you treat it like naming a child.
I wouldn't.
Like I wouldn't like if I would like we'll name a deer. Like imagine that your wife gives birth, okay,
Yes.
and out of her vaginal canal
just happened.
spills this slimy child. I wouldn't look over and be like, the couch buck, the couch kid, right? Or the bed sheet kid.
Yeah.
But you guys would kind of be like, what are we going to name it? What are we going to name it?
There's some truth to that.
Yeah. So you treat it more like the birth of a child. When we'd be like, that buck, you kind of see the sunshine shining on him. Yeah. Then a minute later, like, old sunshine buck, he's over chasing a doe all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it just is.
But I think it does go back to what you're saying before, because whatever we call this deer, you might be referring to that animal for years now, or for months, or whatever it might be.
If you hadn't come up with a name for Holyfield, how in the world would you ever have managed all the conversations?
I would just,
you'd have to go through life being like, you remember that one buck?
Yeah, it's not practical.
Well, I think before the naming thing came about, it was just like, the 8-point buck that we see on the back 40 all the time.
Mm-hmm. And that's hard to talk about.
Yeah, that one buck that hangs out by the one place?
Yeah.
Well, no, I think but that's how they went by. It was probably like the big 6, the medium 6, the little 6, and then it just came from just saying like the number of points on their head, and that evolved into.
And that still is a common thing today too. A lot of people, many times that still is happening.
The tall 8,
the
heavy 8.
Yep.
We weren't good enough. In all the years I spent hunting whitetails, we weren't good enough, dedicated enough whitetail hunters to get into a position where we would have even need to have begun naming them. When you became aware of that thing, it was because it was walking through the damn woods towards you.
Yeah.
Right? That's when you became aware of its presence.
I think to me,
we just weren't scientific about it.
If anything gets a little funny, it's where if so much has gone into it, and you sort of can look at it as like, I've almost farmed this deer. Like I probably watched him when he was a fawn. I've been feeding him off my food plots or whatever it is. I've let him grow up. I named him when he was young. My plan was to kill him when he was 6, and then I did.
It's agriculture.
It's a different thing. And I'm not saying you shouldn't get excited about it, and it's great to get excited about it, but for me, it's not like.
So where's the difference, though, whether you see that deer for the first time at 3 years old and then shoot him at 6, or if you saw him as a year and a half old.
The mystery. If you
Yeah.
if you kind of if you
The
have
mystery.
if you have a little chunk, if you have a chunk of land, and you're able to like sort of like limit the comings and goings, limit the access on the land, and you grow up particular crops and find this deer, and you're like feeding them different supplements and sort of like taking care of him and cultivating him for this day when he will achieve maximum yield and harvest. It's very similar to my brother raises sheep. My brother raises lambs. It winds up seeming more like his raising of lambs for slaughter. It seems more like that than it does hunting. But I don't begrudge him the raising of lambs. I think he's got 10 acres of irrigated pasture. Why not raise some lambs on it? His friends like the meat. He eats deer and elk, but his buddies, right?
Yeah.
Use that. I would never be like, that's immoral. It's not. It's just different.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, and whatever, like we were talking about the turkey hunt earlier, we were talking about, whether or not to use decoys. And you're like, well, why don't you just use decoys, but instead to make it harder, use a bow. And I'm like, well, I explained to Mark that I'm very happy with where my bar is set, is that if without decoys, just with my calls and a shotgun, that like there's like the perfect balance of challenge and being defeated and being humbled and some success also. And it's a very happy place that I'm at. And maybe in 10 years I'll say, well, I am going to go to the bow or go down to a 20 gauge or whatever. But that's just like a nice place to be. And I think like you're saying, like taking the mystery out and controlling the situation to the point where you almost know that they're going to be in that field, so often. It changes it.
But, another thing is, why do people care so much what people think, though? Like, why are you sensitive to it?
No, I don't think I'm sensitive. I think it's just an interesting question. Or
Yeah,
something to
no,
think
it's
about.
interesting, Russell, and it's good that we can talk about it because I think that there's a way where, like, so we're sitting around talking about ideas around hunting and what we enjoy about hunting and don't enjoy about hunting, right? I think that it could be that something doesn't appeal to me personally, okay? It should be that you'd be able to share that it doesn't appeal to you personally. You explain what does appeal to you personally.
Yep.
And none of this should be taken as a condemnation of certain practices.
Yeah, or as a wedge being driven.
Yeah. It's just
amongst hunters.
If we were sitting around talking about how you like your steak prepared, right? And I'm talking about how I like my steak prepared. No one would ever be like, why are you trying to drive a wedge between steak eaters? It's like, I like grilled. You're like, I like sous vide, and then I finish it with a torch.
Yeah.
So, you see, you're driving a wedge between steak consumers. It's like, no, we're just talking about the different things that we like and enjoy.
Yeah.
So in trying to articulate what I like, what I see or what I look at, I just don't want you to take it to be that I'm somehow, that I'm taking it to be that it's somehow anything other than just like what's appealing to me.
Yeah.
So that's just a thing I noticed. And I view too on this step toward the agriculturalization, which isn't a word, I don't think. The agriculturalization of deer hunting. When I get this idea, like taking this step toward the agriculturalization of deer hunting, it comes to a point where someone's like, you know what? And I'm going to string a fence. Right? You can keep marching it down. You can keep marching it down into a direction. And, it just could march in. It marches into a place where I think that some people are just naturally going to look and be like, wow, it just stopped. At some point, it kind of doesn't seem like hunting anymore.
Right.
It seems kind of more like like I said, it seems more like agronomy. Not agronomy, like animal husbandry maybe. It takes on, that's probably it. It becomes a sort of animal husbandry.
And I 100% agree with you in that it's neat to be able to talk about these different ideas and different perspectives and stuff, and look at it as a way of just understanding different ways that we're seeing things versus it being adversarial or something like that. I think it's you said this a while back, but it's refreshing to be able to find people where you can talk about these things and get those different perspectives. And it's funny, you talk about like the agriculturalization of deer hunting, and it's something that when I hear that, it sounds negative, like to me, like thinking if what I'm doing is something like that. That feels like a little sour to me.
You don't like that. You don't like the way I'm describing it.
Not that you're describing that, but if that was just as I think about that for myself, it's like I don't like the idea of agriculturalizing my hunting or something. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I'm involved in, I do some of these things myself, and it doesn't feel like that. Like what I'm doing doesn't feel like I'm farming wildlife or something. It still feels very. There's a tremendous amount of work. There's a ton of hunting. I fail 99.9% of the time if what we're talking about is, killing the sheep, your brother's sheep. He's having a very different outcome than
he knows he's going to get them.
There's the farthest thing from a guarantee with what I'm doing or what 99% of other deer hunters that I know are doing that are participating in some kind of management, habitat-wise or age structure and choosing what kind of deer they're going to take. But it's just different, and it's hard to articulate that or help someone understand that unless you are doing it. Because I can see from the outside looking in, you see all these practices and the way that stuff's talked about, and it does sound like farming in some ways. But it doesn't feel that way from the inside. But I don't know how to make those two ends meet as I'm like thinking through all this. Like why?
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing to think about.
And there's so many different angles to think about it. So like I killed a nice buck in Colorado last year, and we had gone up in the area, the first time we'd ever been and stepped into an area, and we were hiking out in the dark and bumped a couple big bucks in the dark. Dusk. And I come back up the next day, and not too far away from there, I catch one of these bucks out in the sage flat. And got him. Very mysterious deer to me. I don't know its past, right? Just a mysterious deer. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how long it's been in the area. Now imagine that there had been a guy who had just been hunting that buck. And he had studied that buck. And he'd been out there observing that buck all the time. And watched it come up through velvet. And knew where it had spent its summer. And knew that it had moved into this area. And knew when it would come out in this sage flat, right? And knew that thing in and out and was trying to get it. And I get it. So what's his perspective on it going to be? You shit-lucked into some buck. And I did. And he might have been like, and I probably deserved it more when you look at the time I put into that animal and studying that animal. And I would be, if I confronted that person, I'd be like, you know what, bro? It's true. It's true. You deserve that buck more than I did. I got him. I shit-lucked into him, right? But you sort of like the effort and all that. So I think it always like the quality of a hunt always remains in the eye of the beholder. And the one place I think that hunters go that verges into the unethical, or the verges into the, I don't want to use the word unethical, that just verges into bullshit territory, is when you do something and you feel the need to conceal the reality of what happened. Guys that hunt high wire never put that fence in the photo. People that shoot stuff with ear tags take the ear tags out before they take the photo. So then it's like, so what are you embarrassed about?
Right.
What is it that you wish this looked like? Because you wish it was something other than it is. When you get to that point where you wish it had been other than it was, I think then you've trailed into stuff that's beyond just personal perception. And beyond these like subjective ideas of what's right and what's wrong. At that point, you've become like where you're lying to yourself and you're lying to others. If you if you buy a piece of property and there ain't shit for animals on there because it's just like piss poor habitat, and you build it up and make the desert bloom, so to speak, and you do things and you do habitat improvements and put in some deadfalls and top some trees and start planting some crops and start thinking about connectivity between different properties, and all of a sudden you create like this little wildlife mecca, and it's benefiting everything from bucks down to chickadees, and all of a sudden you got moths and butterflies hanging around that you'd never seen before, and you go outside and you did some water and you hear frogs you never heard before, and you wind up shooting some tank or buck, right? That dude's going to be so proud of what he accomplished. Who gives a shit if someone else looks at it and they think that there's, like, they don't know the full story.
Yeah.
Now, if that guy, like, bought a little area and put a fence there and went and bought a deer from a guy down the road and then pumped it all up full of medications and artificial feeds and shot it and then drug it out of there and took a picture of it somewhere else, it's just different. Yeah. And everybody knows it's different.
And I think something that comes into play here too is traditional use, and not looking at it like over 100 years, but just the stuff that we grew up with in our lifetimes. Like you did the bait thing.
Yeah.
I didn't do it at all.
You guys didn't hunt bait?
Never. I've never done it.
How were you
finding
deer?
I think one time my dad somehow showed up.
Hunt bait?
Never.
And it was a legal bait state.
Yeah. One time my dad showed up with these, like, I think it was like a full-on incense. It was like one of those, I don't know if the buck bomb thing ever took off, but it was some variation of that. But it was literally like an incense. You're supposed to like dig a little hole out, put it in there, and then light it, and it was going to attract deer.
Oh, I got you.
Incense.
Yeah.
Incense.
Right? Incense, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to find the singular version of incense. Yeah, like, so you've grown up in a world where, like, food plots and stuff, and your career of whitetails has, like, just been a part of it, right? So you're just immersed in it, and it's like, you're like, yeah, man, it's like what we do, and it totally feels normal, But again, we didn't do that either. But again, for most of my whitetail life, I hunted probably 6 days a year for whitetail. Right at the end, before I left to Colorado, it might have gotten up to a dozen or 15. But, like, can you still bait in Michigan?
You can bait, but it's much more regulated. From September 15th through the end of the year. And
you can't put the whole pickup load of carrots out.
Can you run like the big feeders that you see in Texas?
I don't think you can put as much as they put out. You've got it's like a 1 gallon or 5 gallon bucket or whatever it is that you can put out at a given time.
Got it. But, like, do you don't go down that road?
Well, I don't bait.
You don't.
I don't personally use.
Yeah, you don't personally bait at all, right? But again, down in Texas is like it's what they do.
I mean, whatever.
Mostly.
If it's legal, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Can I tell you another moment? Earlier you asked about revelatory moments.
Yeah. What do you got?
You could hunt. So we'd hunt deer of the bow from October 1 till then rifle season be November 15th, and you'd hunt guns for 10 days, and then you'd have this window of the late season archery. Mm-hmm. And I remember being out there. It was a year that they couldn't get the corn out because everything was too wet. I remember sitting up on a cornfield in Zerlot property, and finally the ground froze. And he went out and like the guy went out in the frozen ground and picked a bunch of corn. And this is a spot where if you saw 2 deer, it was a good night. And I remember one night he picked this corn. It was a couple nights later, and I counted 90 deer one night.
Wow.
And I remember that opening up the mystery of, like, again, you could look and be like, it's an artificial crop, right? Whatever. But to look and to see that level of response to a landscape change. And the being like, how in the world did they know?
Yeah.
How did they know? Like, how did word spread? Right? So in that way, it was like one of those, it opens you up to some level of bafflement, And I think like inviting those moments of discovery however they occur, being like open to those moments of discovery and analyzing what's going on has kind of a value, you know, like those moments where you're like, something happened, you can't figure it out.
Yeah. And I feel like those types of moments, if you're open to them and like searching for them or putting yourself in a position to accept them, those kinds of things can occur no matter how you're hunting. It could be in the find a new place, hunt it for the first time, and you get this mystery, or you get this surprise, or these things happen in the moment. Or it could happen where you work one little piece of ground for years and you get to learn it. The depth of those moments are different maybe. The scale of those moments are different maybe. But you can have these really powerful, interesting, compelling, revelatory moments, I think, whether it's food plots and hanging out in one spot or brand new public land spots. And I just count myself fortunate that I've been able to experience both. And I find both of those really interesting and exciting and satisfying, but just in very different ways. But I think that kind of comes back to everything we've talked about here. There's lots of different ways to get some form of enjoyment or satisfaction out of a hunt or that journey. And it's neat to be able to see all those different facets of it. So for you guys, if you were to go back, and I know you dabble a little bit of whitetail hunting back, in Wisconsin every once in a while, stuff like that. But what would it take to get you guys back to your whitetail roots? What would be that dream whitetail hunt that for you would make it like, now that would be really cool. I want to go do that.
Well, I hunted western whitetails hard for 3 or 4 years in Nebraska. But pretty different than hunting whitetails here. Again, you're glassing them up. And
Didn't you just get a whitetail last year?
No, but I went on a whitetail hunt. I went back to our stomping grounds in Wisconsin.
No, your little local hidey hole.
Oh, yeah, I killed a doe.
Yeah.
You're right. And then the year before, I killed a little buck there. But, yeah, that was very much like a grocery run. I'm hunting I'm hunting where I can see the guy's house. When I sit against a tree, I sit so that I'm facing away from the house. I'm not going to shoot in that direction, kind of a thing. And there's just a lot of deer there, and it's very much like a nice way to kind of top off the freezer, So, yeah. No, to me it's just like I wasn't for both of those animals. I wasn't really there for like the excitement of the hunt. It was kind of like last day of the season.
Yeah. Got
an unfilled buck tag. That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'd like to have the meat. Whatever buck I see, I'm shooting.
But what, like, if you could outline a whitetail hunt that would be like really compelling for you, what would that situation be?
Oh, I would just go right back to the country that we get to hunt in Wisconsin is it's sweet. It's very little ag. The stuff that my dad and his friends own is zero ag. We have some ag on the neighbors, so it's just big woods, and it's hard to read the sign there. I've tromped those woods a lot, and I still have like a minute understanding of general deer movement on this chunk of land, and it's pretty big. It's like 400 acres, pretty sizable chunk of land, and I had a blast hunting there last year. Never saw what I'd call shooter buck. I don't know if I saw a buck. But yeah, I loved it. Had a great time. Like I said, I love hanging in these oaks in just the big wood forest. It's just, you spend enough time in one place and the other place gets appealing again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me to be doing the kind of stuff you do. During the rut with my bow, sitting up, perching up in different trees here and there.
Yeah.
Just watching all the stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I remember I hadn't sat in a tree stand in years at one point in time. I hadn't been in a tree in a long time, and then was sitting up hunting whitetails with my brother and had a couple raccoons fighting the tree next to me. And I remember just being like, man, I kind of like the level of detail you see when you're just sitting.
Yeah.
You walk out in the woods, man, you think there's nothing around. You sit there 15 minutes, all of a sudden you realize there's like 10 squirrels hanging around that passing through, they would have been too paranoid, but then they forget about you.
Yeah.
Or having birds land on your arrow. Someone I was just talking to had an owl trying to land on him.
Wow.
It was my brother. Yeah, my brother was telling me that. He had a great horned owl come and try to land on him. So it scared the shit out of him, too.
Yeah,
Wasn't that Matt that just happened to?
I think so.
Says he almost fell out of a tree. So, yeah, I would want to come and do, not for all that. I mean, that'd all be like extras. But to come and just do another, like with someone that really knows it inside and out like you, to come and have you like put me up in a good tree with my bow during rut and just kind of watching all that taking place, I think it'd be a blast, man.
We should do it.
No, I'm planning on doing it.
All right.
Dude, it's like, it's fascinating to me.
It is. You know, another cool thing that I just thought of, and this is something I've thought about in the past when talking to my friends who never hunted out west, or someone who has hunted out west but never hunted back east, when you're talking about stand hunting versus like, you know, chasing down bugling elk or something. And with what I find so cool about chasing down elk out west is that when you are fully, there's something going on in the moment, so fully engaging that you can't think about anything else. Nothing else is on your mind except for the next step. What's the wind doing right now? Where am I going next? Where is it going? You are fully 2,000% in this electric moment. You can't think about anything else. Nothing else in the world is on your mind. And that's a really cool thing to have. Like experiences like that fully engage you to the highest possible amount. That's a really cool thing. When you're deer hunting and you're sitting in a tree stand for 14 hours straight, there's nothing. You are relieved of anything else, and it opens your mind to everything now. So when else in your life do you have this quiet space in your mind to reflect on stuff, to think about things more than just what you're doing in the next 10 seconds or what job do I need to do or what blah, blah. You can just sit and you can breathe and you can just
I used to bring very small paperbacks and have my coat kind of open where I could just read it like a poker player holding his and could like stuff that paperback through an open button or two.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you're reading in the tree stand, Steve.
I'm sure, man. But like up until the magic moment, though, you know, because I couldn't deal with the
still quiet nothing,
the quiet noise of your own brain, man.
Like that, I feel like that's an important, rare thing these days.
Yeah, I don't deal with that. Yeah,
I feel like in mountain hunting, it's the in and out. Like when you got to pound, 3-4 miles in the dark either direction, your brain gets to a similar place.
Yeah,
where you just kind of have to just put one foot in front of the other, and you're thinking about all kinds of things.
Yeah. And it's cool to have those two different opportunities. Like those two different things are really compelling in their own way, and that's what makes all this stuff pretty cool. So,
driving a wedge, man.
Driving a wedge. Don't want to do that. Any final any final things on the whitetail world you guys want to comment on before we shut this down and go think about turkeys? Yanni, anything?
Final whitetail thoughts,
or otherwise. Anything we need to touch on before we hit the sack?
No. Time to hit the sack, Mark. You kept me up too late.
I know. I apologize.
No, man. I got nothing to add. It's like I grew up hunting them and remain interested in them along with a whole ton of other animals that I'm interested in.
Well, thanks for walking down the whitetail path for at least one more night.
All right. And I'm going to take you up on the hunting thing. But now that you taught me the word gar hole, damn, I'm going to be very sensitive to being placed in a gar hole.
I didn't teach you gar hole. You knew about that before.
I'd never heard that.
Really? Never heard about getting gar holed?
No, I would think that this is a good place to go bow fishing for gar. If someone said they're going to the gar hole, I'd be like, sweet, let's go.
Well, now I feel like we need to touch on it really quick. If anyone doesn't know, if you're getting gar holed, that's like you're hunting with a buddy or you're hunting with someone else, and they're going to say, oh, well, you should go hunt this spot. They send you to a spot to hunt, and you get done and you hunt it all day and you didn't see anything, or you get there and you're like, oh, gosh, this is horrible. I'm sitting next to the highway or a parking lot or the tree stand. The seat's missing on the tree stand, and you're just in a wide open field, and there's nothing all day.
Now, does your buddy do this to you on purpose?
Yeah, because he took this good spot.
Yeah, you would say, at least, you would assume, he gar-holed me.
But I think it's important to designate, like, if he does, like, can you be gar-holed kind of by accident, by coincidence, or is it always like you're getting hosed?
I think Mark
Gar
knows the business well enough to know when he's been gar holed.
Yes, it would be with intent. A gar holing would be if it was done with intent.
Because if a guy said to you, "Hey man, you're gonna get up there and you're gonna think I gar holed you," but
really,
hear me out,
yeah,
right? Then, right, you might be like,
Yeah.
"Wow, it seems like a stupid
But I feel
spot."
like you're in a rocky relationship if this is actually going on. Because one of two things.
Well, no,
Either-
he's saying guides will gar hole people.
Well,
Oh, right. No, that's what I was saying. Because I've gar-holed guys.
oh, you have as a guide?
But here's my explanation. One of two things. Either you're an asshole, and so you're being gar-holed, or you're an asshole, and you're going to be because like I'm never going to gar-hole one of you two.
Right.
It's just like I'll take the gar-hole spot and give you guys the bitch.
You'll gar hole yourself.
I try to hang out with people that are sort of going through life in general that way.
Not
right?
gar holing others.
Yeah. And so, life is too short for assholes.
Yeah.
So
I'd say 99% of the time that is used, it's used in jest.
Yeah.
Like you're giving your buddy a hard time. Like
you sit all day and nothing happens. You come back,
you
you're like,
shafted
dude,
me,
bro.
put me in the gar hole. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there are some real instances. I'm so glad. Like this made my night, knowing that I introduced that term to you guys.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll use it.
please do, and I will take credit.
yeah, I'm gonna put you in a Mondo gar hole.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here. And that is it. Quick reminder, though, to hit us up on iTunes for a quick rating or review if you haven't yet. And then also be sure to subscribe to the Wired to Hunt YouTube channel. There's lots to come there soon. So then to wrap things up here, I guess I'll just finish by thanking our partners at Yeti Coolers, Matthews Archery, Maven Optics, Whitetail Properties, and Huntera Maps. And of course, thank you all for listening. As I mentioned earlier, you are part of an amazing community. It's been just the joy of my life to serve you and share my stories and experiences and lessons learned. I can't wait to see where things go next. So thanks again, and until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.